The message appeared on Rachel Morgan's phone at exactly 7:47 in the evening, just as she was reviewing the final presentation slides for the Henderson account. Her office was quiet, most colleagues having left hours ago, and the glow of her computer screen cast soft shadows across her desk. She had planned to stay late again, trying to perfect every detail of the pitch that could secure her team a promotion and a significant bonus. At 38 years old, Rachel had built her career with the same methodical precision she applied to everything in her life. As a senior marketing executive at a mid-sized corporate firm, she earned just over $100,000 a year, a salary that had taken years of dedication, late nights, and unwavering commitment to achieve. She glanced at her phone when it buzzed, expecting perhaps a message from Diana, her best friend since college, or maybe a reminder about picking up groceries on the way home. Instead, she saw Michael's name on the screen. Her boyfriend of 3 years rarely texted her during work hours unless it was something trivial, like asking if they needed milk or telling her he would be home late. But this message was different. The words seemed to pulse with an urgency that made her stomach tighten even before she fully processed their meaning. "We need to talk. I messed up and don't know how to tell you." Rachel sat perfectly still, her fingers hovering over the keyboard where she had been typing just seconds before. The office air conditioning hummed in the background, a constant white noise she usually found comforting. Now it seemed too loud, too present. She read the message again, then a third time, as if repetition might change the words or reveal some hidden meaning that would make them less ominous. Her mind immediately began cycling through possibilities, each one worse than the last. Had he lost his job? Had he gotten into an accident? Had he done something that would upend the life they had been building together? She tried calling him immediately. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times, then went to voicemail. His voice on the recording sounded cheerful and casual, a stark contrast to the weight of the message he had just sent. She called again. Same result. Her hands were beginning to tremble slightly, a physical response she tried to suppress through sheer force of will. Rachel Morgan did not panic. She solved problems. She created strategies. She maintained composure even when everything around her felt like it was crumbling. With fingers that felt strangely disconnected from her body, she typed a response. "What happened? Are you okay?" She hit send and watched the message turn from sending to delivered to read, but no reply came. 1 minute passed, then 2, then 5. The silence was somehow worse than any words could have been. Rachel stood up from her desk, abandoning the presentation that had seemed so crucial just moments ago. She walked to the women's restroom, her heels clicking against the polished floor, with a rhythm that seemed too normal for how her world was tilting. In the bathroom, she gripped the edge of the sink and looked at herself in the mirror. She saw a woman who looked put together, professional, in control. Her dark hair was styled perfectly, her makeup still intact despite the long day. She was wearing the tailored blazer she had bought specifically for important client meetings, the one that made her feel powerful and capable. But her eyes told a different story. There was fear there, hovering just beneath the surface of her composed expression. She took several deep breaths, trying to steady herself. Whatever Michael had done, whatever he needed to tell her, she would face it with the same strength she brought to every challenge in her life. She had built a successful career from nothing. She had supported Michael through his career struggles, through his periods of unemployment, through his constant promises that he was on the verge of a breakthrough. She had paid their rent alone for 2 years, covered his car payment when he claimed he was between opportunities, funded the online courses he swore would advance his career, but never seemed to complete. She had done all of this without complaint, because she believed in him, because she loved him, because she thought they were building something together. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Michael. "I need to tell you in person. I'm pregnant." Rachel stared at the screen, confusion cutting through her fear. Pregnant? That made no sense. Michael was a man. Unless her brain caught up with what her eyes were seeing. He had made a mistake. He meant someone else was pregnant. Someone was pregnant with his child. The bathroom suddenly felt too small, the air too thin. Rachel leaned against the wall, pressing her palm flat against the cool tiles, as if they could somehow anchor her to reality. The fluorescent lights above seemed too bright now, harsh and unforgiving. She could hear the hum of the building's ventilation system, the distant sound of a janitor's cart rolling down a hallway somewhere, the rapid beating of her own heart. She looked at the message again, reading it over and over as if the words might rearrange themselves into something that made sense, something that didn't mean what she knew they meant, but they stayed the same. Stubborn, devastating, final. Rachel walked back to her office in a daze, gathered her laptop and briefcase with mechanical movements, and left the building without saying goodbye to the security guard who usually asked about her weekend plans. The parking garage was dimly lit, shadows stretching across concrete pillars and painted lines. She found her car, a modest sedan she had bought new 3 years ago when her promotion came through, and sat in the driver's seat without starting the engine. For a long moment, she simply sat there in the silence, her hands resting on the steering wheel, her eyes fixed on nothing in particular. She thought about the life she had built, the careful plans she had made, the future she had envisioned with such clarity. She had always been the kind of person who believed that hard work and dedication would lead to stability and happiness. She had followed all the rules, made all the right choices, invested in the people and dreams that seemed worth investing in. And now, sitting in a parking garage with the weight of Michael's message pressing down on her chest, she wondered if any of it had been real. The drive home took nearly 40 minutes, traffic moving slowly through the city streets as people made their way back to their lives, their families, their own complicated stories. Rachel drove on autopilot, her mind elsewhere, replaying every moment of the past 3 years like a film she was seeing for the first time. She remembered meeting Michael on a dating app, how his profile had seemed so genuine and straightforward. He had written that he was looking for something real, someone who wanted to build a life together, not just pass time. She had been drawn to his honesty, or what she thought was his honesty. Their first date had been at a small Italian restaurant, and he had made her laugh with stories about difficult clients at his job. He seemed ambitious, driven, someone who understood the value of hard work. In those early months, everything had felt right. Michael would surprise her with home-cooked meals after her long days at the office. He would listen with apparent interest when she talked about her projects and challenges at work. He seemed supportive, encouraging, genuinely invested in her success. When she mentioned wanting to move in together after a year of dating, he had been enthusiastic. They had found the apartment together, a 2-bedroom place in a safe neighborhood with good natural light and a small balcony. The rent was $1,800 a month, a significant amount, but Rachel's salary made it manageable. It was when they discussed splitting expenses that the first crack appeared, though Rachel had not recognized it as such at the time. Michael explained that his salary as a financial analyst was modest, and he was trying to save money for professional development courses that would help him advance. He said he wanted to contribute more in the future, once he had climbed higher in his career. Rachel, ever understanding and supportive, had offered to cover the full rent. He would handle half the utilities and buy groceries occasionally. It seemed like a reasonable arrangement, a temporary solution until he got on his feet. But temporary had stretched into 2 years. The promotion Michael kept promising never came. The professional development courses he enrolled in were never completed. There was always a reason, always an explanation. The course material was too theoretical. His boss didn't appreciate his contributions. The company culture was toxic. The economy was unstable. Rachel listened to each excuse and believed them because she wanted to believe them, because she had invested so much already, because walking away felt like admitting failure. Meanwhile, Rachel continued climbing her own career ladder. She led successful campaigns, brought in major clients, earned bonuses and recognition, and with each success, she poured more money into their shared life. When Michael wanted a newer car because his old one was unreliable, Rachel co-signed the loan and made the first 6 payments until he got caught up. When he expressed interest in an online digital marketing certification that cost $800, she transferred the money without hesitation. When he needed new clothes for job interviews, she took him shopping and paid for everything. Diana, her best friend, had started expressing concern about 6 months into the living arrangement. They were having coffee one Saturday morning at their favorite cafe, sunlight streaming through the windows, the smell of fresh pastries filling the air. Diana had stirred her latte slowly, choosing her words with care. "I'm just wondering," Diana had said, her tone casual but her eyes serious. "Does Michael ever talk about when he's going to start contributing more? You're basically supporting him entirely." Rachel had felt defensive immediately. "He's going through a rough patch. His field is competitive. He just needs time to find the right opportunity. It's been over a year, Rach." Diana had set down her cup and leaned forward slightly. "I'm not saying he's a bad guy. I'm just saying that a partner should be contributing, especially when you're working as hard as you are. He contributes in other ways," Rachel had insisted, though even as she said it, she was not entirely sure what those ways were. "He handles things around the apartment. He's supportive, emotionally." Diana had not pushed further, but the look in her eyes had said everything she was not saying out loud. Rachel had changed the subject, and they had not discussed Michael's financial contribution again. But the seed of doubt had been planted, even if Rachel was not ready to let it grow. Now, as Rachel pulled into the parking lot of their apartment building, that seed felt like it had bloomed into something dark and choking. She turned off the engine and sat in the car, watching the windows of their second-floor unit. The lights were on. Michael was home. He was waiting, and she was about to walk into a conversation that would change everything. She gathered her briefcase and laptop bag, locked the car, and walked toward the building entrance with steady steps. Each footfall felt heavy, deliberate. She climbed the stairs instead of taking the elevator, needing the extra time to prepare herself mentally. At their apartment door, she paused with her key in her hand, took one more deep breath, and unlocked it. Michael was sitting on their living room couch, hunched forward with his elbows on his knees, his hands clasped tightly together. He looked up when she entered, and she saw immediately that he had been crying. His eyes were red and swollen, his face pale. He opened his mouth as if to speak, then closed it again, seeming unable to find the words. Rachel closed the door behind her with a soft click that echoed in the tense silence. She set down her briefcase and laptop bag carefully, buying herself a few extra seconds. She did not sit down. She remained standing, her posture straight, her expression carefully neutral. She looked at Michael, at this man she had loved and supported and believed in, and waited for him to explain how he had destroyed everything they had built. The silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. Finally, Michael spoke, his voice barely above a whisper, rough with emotion. "The baby might not be yours." But they had never had a baby. The words made no sense until Rachel's mind adjusted them, corrected them to what he actually meant. The baby might not be his with her. The baby was someone else's, with him. Someone else was pregnant with Michael's child, and he was not even certain if there was a possibility it could somehow be Rachel's problem too. The absurdity of the statement, the sheer audacity of how he had phrased it, almost made her laugh. Almost. Instead, she felt something inside her go very cold and very still. Rachel's voice, when she finally spoke, was unnaturally calm. It was the same tone she used in board meetings when presenting data that contradicted a client's assumptions, measured and controlled. "Whose baby, Michael?" He flinched at the question, as if she had struck him. His hands twisted together, knuckles white with tension. "Her name is Amanda. She works at that boutique downtown. The one where I said I was buying gifts for my sister. Rachel felt a sharp, bitter clarity cut through the fog of shock. Michael's sister lived across the country, and they barely spoke. She had always found it odd that he suddenly became so thoughtful about buying her presents, but she had accepted his explanation because she wanted to believe him. Because trusting him had been easier than questioning everything. "How long?" Rachel asked. 2 words. Simple. Direct. Michael's eyes dropped to the floor. 4 months. 4 months. Rachel's mind immediately began calculating, because that was what she did. She organized information and made sense of chaos. 4 months ago, she had been drowning in the Anderson project, working late every night, sometimes not getting home until 9 or 10 in the evening. She had been apologetic about it, telling Michael she was sorry for being absent, for being distracted. He had told her not to worry, that he understood, that he was proud of her dedication. And while she had been building presentations and negotiating contracts, he had been building a lie. "Tell me everything," Rachel said, still standing, still refusing to sit down, as if sitting would mean accepting this as her new reality. "I want to know exactly what happened." Michael's story came out in broken fragments, punctuated by long pauses and shallow breaths. Amanda was 29 years old, beautiful in that effortless way some women were, with long blonde hair and an easy smile. She had helped him pick out a scarf once, months ago, and they had talked, just talked. He insisted, as if that somehow mattered now. He had gone back to the store a week later, ostensibly to buy something else, but really to see her again. They had exchanged numbers. It had started innocently, he claimed, just friendly text messages about nothing important. Rachel listened without interrupting, her face a mask of composure that betrayed none of the storm raging inside her. She watched Michael's mouth move, forming words that kept digging the hole deeper, and she felt strangely detached from it all, as if she were watching this happen to someone else. The friendly messages had evolved into meeting for coffee during Amanda's lunch breaks. Coffee had turned into longer conversations in his car, parked in empty lots where no one would see them. And then, one afternoon when Rachel had texted him that she would be working late again, Michael had driven to Amanda's apartment. He did not provide details about what happened there, but he did not need to. The silence where those details should have been said, everything. It had continued from there, a pattern of deception that he had maintained with careful precision. Every time Rachel worked late, every time she was focused on a deadline, every time she trusted him to understand why she could not be fully present, he had been with Amanda. Meeting her at a motel 15 minutes from the boutique, cheap and anonymous, where they could disappear for an hour before returning to their separate lives, as if nothing had happened. "She made me feel seen," Michael said, and Rachel almost laughed at the cliché of it. "Like I mattered, like I was more than just someone waiting around for you to have time for me." There it was, the twist of the knife, the implication that somehow this was partly Rachel's fault for working too hard, for being too focused on her career, for not making him feel sufficiently appreciated while she was paying all their bills. "So you felt neglected?" Rachel said, her voice still that same eerie calm. "And your solution was to have an affair with a woman young enough to still think a 36-year-old man with no career prospects is impressive." Michael's face flushed with anger and shame. "That's not fair." "Fair?" The word came out sharper than Rachel intended. "You want to talk about fair? I have paid our rent alone for 2 years, Michael. 2 years. $1,800 a month. That's $43,200 I have spent keeping a roof over our heads while you figured out your career. I paid for your car, your courses, your clothes, your everything. I believed every excuse you gave me about why you needed more time, why the promotion had not come through, why you needed just one more opportunity. And while I was working myself to exhaustion to support us, you were spending your afternoons in a motel with someone else." The numbers seemed to land on Michael like physical blows. He shrank back against the couch cushions, his face crumpling. I know I messed up. But Rachel, I'm telling you now. I'm being honest now. That has to count for something. You're being honest because you got caught, Rachel corrected. If Amanda wasn't pregnant, would you have ever told me? Or would you have just kept living this double life indefinitely? Michael had no answer for that. His silence was answer enough. Rachel finally moved, but not to sit down. She walked to the window that overlooked their building's parking lot, her arms crossed over her chest. The sun had set while they had been talking, and the streetlights had come on, casting orange pools of light across the pavement. She could see her car down there, parked in its usual spot, a symbol of the stability and order she had worked so hard to create. Everything in her life had been carefully planned and executed. Everything except this. Does she know about me? Rachel asked, still looking out the window. Yes, Michael said quietly. She knew I had a girlfriend. I told her it was complicated, that we were having problems. Another lie. They had not been having problems, or at least Rachel had not known they were having problems. She had thought they were solid, stable, building toward a future. Every time she had brought up engagement or marriage, Michael had deflected with what seemed like reasonable concerns. Let's wait until I get that promotion. Let's wait until we're both more financially stable. Let's wait until the timing is better. She had interpreted his hesitation as financial anxiety, as a man who wanted to be in a better position before taking that step. Now, she understood it for what it really was. A man keeping his options open, refusing to commit, because commitment would have interfered with his freedom to betray her. And the baby? Rachel turned from the window to face him. You said it might not be yours. Why the uncertainty? Michael shifted uncomfortably. We used protection, usually, but there were a couple of times when we didn't, and the timing lines up. It could be mine. Rachel felt something crack inside her chest, a physical sensation like ice breaking. The casual way he admitted to risking not just her trust, but her health, her safety, with his carelessness, was almost worse than the affair itself. She had been intimate with him during those 4 months, believing they were exclusive, believing she was safe. The realization of how completely he had disrespected her, how little he had valued her well-being, made her feel physically ill. Get out, she said suddenly. The words came from somewhere deep and primal, a place of pure survival instinct. Michael looked up sharply, confusion and fear mixing on his face. What? Get out of my apartment, Rachel repeated, her voice gaining strength. You have 2 hours to pack your essential things and leave. Rachel, please. We need to talk about this. We need to figure out what we're going to do. We are not going to do anything, Rachel said, each word deliberate and final. You are going to leave. This apartment is in my name. Only my name, Michael. You never wanted your name on the lease, remember? You said it was better for your credit to not have that responsibility. Well, congratulations. You have no legal claim to this place, and I want you out of it. Michael stood up, panic replacing the shame on his face. You can't just throw me out. Where am I supposed to go? That is not my problem, Rachel said, and she meant it with every fiber of her being. You should have thought about that before you spent 4 months betraying me. You have 2 hours. Take your clothes, your toiletries, your laptop, whatever you need for the next few days. We can arrange for you to get the rest of your things later. This is crazy, Michael said, his voice rising. You're overreacting. Yes, I made a mistake, but people work through these things. Couples overcome infidelity all the time. We can go to counseling. We can fix this. Rachel walked to the front door and opened it, standing beside it with her hand on the knob. We are not married, Michael. We are not even engaged, despite 3 years together, because you made sure we never got to that point. You kept me at arm's length while enjoying all the benefits of my support. You used me, you lied to me, and you exposed me to risks I never consented to. There is nothing to fix, because there is nothing left. 2 hours. Michael stared at her, seeming to finally understand that she was serious, that this was not a momentary reaction that would fade with time and apologies. He looked around the apartment as if seeing it for the first time, perhaps realizing only now what he was losing. Then he walked past her into the bedroom, and Rachel heard drawers opening, the sound of a suitcase being pulled from the closet. She remained by the door, her hand still on the knob, her body rigid with the effort of maintaining her composure. She wanted to scream, to cry, to break something, but she did not. She stood there like a statue, watching the minutes tick by on the clock on the wall, counting down Michael's remaining time in her home and in her life. Diana. She needed to call Diana. Rachel pulled out her phone with trembling fingers and sent a quick text. Michael cheated. Pregnant. Kicking him out. Can I call you later? The response came within seconds. Oh my God. Yes. Call any time. I'm here. I love you. Those last 3 words made Rachel's eyes burn with unshed tears, but she blinked them back. Not yet. She could fall apart later. Right now, she needed to be strong, needed to see this through. Michael emerged from the bedroom 20 minutes later with a large suitcase and a duffel bag. His face was blotchy, his movements jerky with barely controlled emotion. He set the bags down by the door and turned to Rachel one more time. I'm sorry, he said, and for the first time, he sounded like he truly meant it. I know that doesn't change anything, but I am sorry. You deserved better. Yes, Rachel agreed simply. I did. Michael picked up his bags and walked out the door. Rachel watched him disappear down the hallway toward the elevator, then closed and locked the door behind him. She turned the deadbolt, attached the chain lock, and, for good measure, pushed a chair under the door handle. It was dramatic and unnecessary, but it made her feel safer somehow, more secure in this space that was now entirely hers again. Only then, alone in the silent apartment with the door secured and Michael's presence finally erased, did Rachel allow herself to move. She walked to the bathroom, turned on the shower as hot as it would go, and stepped under the spray fully clothed. The water soaked through her expensive blazer, her silk blouse, her tailored pants, but she did not care. She stood there until the water ran cold, until her skin was pink and raw, until she felt like maybe she had washed away some small part of the contamination of Michael's betrayal. Later, wrapped in a robe with her wet hair plastered to her head, Rachel sat on the edge of her bed and finally called Diana. Her friend answered on the first ring. "Tell me everything," Diana said, and Rachel did. She talked for over an hour, her voice breaking occasionally, but never dissolving completely into the sobs that threatened. Diana listened without interruption, without saying, "I told you so," even though she had every right to. When Rachel finally finished, there was a long pause before Diana spoke. "I'm proud of you," Diana said softly. "For what?" Rachel asked, genuinely confused. "For wasting 3 years on someone who didn't value me?" "For recognizing your worth," Diana corrected. "For not accepting his excuses, or letting him manipulate you into thinking you should forgive this. You could have let him stay, could have tried to work through it, because you'd already invested so much time and money. But you didn't. You showed him the door immediately. That takes strength, Rach. Real strength." Rachel wanted to believe her, but in that moment, she did not feel strong. She felt broken and foolish and angry at herself for not seeing the signs earlier. But she appreciated Diana's words anyway, tucked them away to examine later when she might be ready to believe them. After they hung up, Rachel lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her mind replaying moments from the past 3 years, looking for clues she had missed. They were there, she realized now. So many of them. The nights Michael came home smelling unfamiliar, the times he was defensive when she asked simple questions about his day, the way he always kept his phone face down on tables and took calls in other rooms, the frequency with which he volunteered to run errands alone. She had ignored all of it, had trusted him despite the small voice in the back of her mind that kept trying to warn her. She thought about Amanda, this 29-year-old woman she had never met, who was now carrying Michael's child. Rachel felt no anger toward her, surprisingly. Amanda had probably believed Michael's lies about their relationship being on the rocks. She was likely another victim of his selfishness, though Rachel had no intention of reaching out to confirm that theory. This was not a situation that required female solidarity or understanding. It was a situation that required Rachel to protect herself and move forward. As she lay there in the darkness, Rachel made a decision. She would not let this destroy her. She would not let Michael's betrayal define her or diminish her sense of self-worth. Tomorrow, she would call a lawyer and make sure her legal position was secure. She would change the locks on the apartment. She would block Michael's number and remove him from her life as completely as possible. And then she would focus on rebuilding, on remembering who she was before Michael, on rediscovering the woman who had built a successful career through determination and intelligence. But tonight, just for tonight, she would allow herself to feel the pain. She pulled a pillow against her chest and finally, let the tears come. Rachel woke up the next morning with swollen eyes and a headache that pulsed behind her temples like a drumbeat. The pillow beside her was damp from the tears she had cried through the night, and for a brief, merciful moment when she first opened her eyes, she forgot why she felt so terrible. Then memory crashed back like a wave, and the pain in her chest returned with renewed intensity. She lay still for several minutes, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the building coming to life around her. Someone's alarm clock buzzed through the thin walls. A dog barked somewhere below. Cars started in the parking lot as people began their Friday morning routines, heading off to jobs and responsibilities, living their normal lives while Rachel's world had tilted on its axis. She forced herself to sit up, then to stand, then to move through the automatic motions of getting ready for work. Shower, coffee, clothing selected with the same care as always, because appearing put together was half the battle of feeling put together. By the time she left the apartment at 7:15, she looked like the same Rachel Morgan who had left yesterday morning. Professional, composed, in control. Only her eyes, still slightly red despite concealer and eye drops, betrayed the truth. At the office, Rachel threw herself into work with an intensity that surprised even her colleagues who were accustomed to her dedication. She revised the Henderson presentation 3 times, perfecting every transition and statistic. She responded to 47 emails before lunch. She scheduled meetings, reviewed reports, and critiqued marketing materials with surgical precision. Work had always been her refuge, the one area of her life where effort directly correlated to results, where dedication was rewarded rather than exploited. Today, it was also her salvation, the only thing keeping her mind from spiraling into the chaos of what her personal life had become. Diana called during her lunch break. Rachel had texted her that morning to say she was going into the office, and Diana, being Diana, had immediately known that meant Rachel was burying herself in work to avoid feeling. "You don't have to pretend to be fine," Diana said gently when Rachel answered. "I'm not pretending," Rachel replied, stirring a salad she had no appetite for. "I'm surviving. There's a difference. Have you heard from him? He's blocked. On everything." Rachel had done it first thing that morning, before her coffee had even finished brewing. Blocked his number, his email, his social media. She had also called the apartment management and requested an immediate lock change, which they had agreed to complete by end of day for a small fee. Every action had been deliberate, strategic, creating distance and barriers between herself and Michael. "Good," Diana said firmly. "That's good. Have you thought about the legal side of things? If the baby is his, I mean." "I have an appointment with a lawyer this afternoon," Rachel said. 4 o'clock. I'm leaving work early. She had found the attorney online that morning, a family law specialist named Richard Henderson, no relation to the Henderson account she was working on. The reviews had been excellent, and his office had squeezed her in for an emergency consultation. "Do you want me to come with you?" Diana offered. Rachel felt a rush of gratitude for this woman who had been her friend through college, through career struggles, through bad relationships and good times, and now through this. "No, I need to do this alone. But thank you. Really." After lunch, Rachel returned to her desk and tried to focus on an email chain about budget allocations, but her mind kept wandering. She thought about the baby, about what it meant for Michael, about whether he would try to be involved or if he would run from that responsibility the way he had run from so many others. She thought about Amanda, barely older than some of Rachel's junior colleagues, now facing single motherhood with a man who had proven himself to be unreliable and dishonest. She thought about the money she had spent over 2 years, $43,000 in rent alone, not counting the car payments, the courses, the clothes, the countless small expenses she had covered without keeping track, because that was what you did for someone you loved. The anger, when it came, was clean and sharp. She had been used, systematically, deliberately used by someone who had seen her kindness and generosity and mistaken them for weakness or stupidity. Michael had taken her support and used it to fund his affair, had taken her trust and shattered it without remorse, had taken her time and wasted it on lies. The anger felt good, felt righteous and energizing in a way that grief did not. At 4 o'clock, Rachel left the office and drove to the lawyer's building downtown. Richard Henderson's office was on the 12th floor, decorated in dark wood and leather furniture that smelled expensive and reassuring. The lawyer himself was in his 50s, with gray hair and sharp eyes that seemed to catalog and assess everything they saw. Rachel explained the situation in clear, concise terms, presenting the facts the way she would present a case study to a client. 3 years together. Not married. Apartment in her name only. His affair. The pregnancy. Her desire to ensure she had no legal obligations to either Michael or his child. Henderson listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes on a yellow legal pad. When Rachel finished, he leaned back in his chair and nodded slowly. "Legally, your position is quite strong," he said. "You're not married, so there's no question of asset division or alimony. The apartment is solely in your name, which means he has no claim to it. As for the pregnancy, if the child is not biologically yours, you have absolutely zero legal obligation toward it or toward him in relation to it." Rachel felt a weight lift slightly. And if he tries to claim he has some right to stay in the apartment because he's lived there for 2 years? "He has no legal standing," Henderson said firmly. "He's essentially been a guest in your home. You can terminate that arrangement at any time, which you've already done. If he refuses to leave or tries to return, that's trespassing, and you can involve the police. What about the money I've spent supporting him? Can I try to recover any of that?" Henderson's expression became sympathetic. "That's more complicated. Unless you have written agreements stating those were loans rather than gifts, it would be very difficult to prove in court that he owes you repayment. The legal costs of pursuing it would likely exceed what you could recover, even if you won." Rachel had expected that answer, but it still stung. $43,000 in rent, plus thousands more in other expenses, gone. Not even the satisfaction of making him pay it back. Just gone. The cost of her misplaced trust. "However," Henderson continued, "I strongly recommend a paternity test as soon as possible. There are non-invasive prenatal tests available after about 10 weeks of pregnancy. They only require a blood sample from the mother and a cheek swab or blood sample from the potential father. If you want absolute certainty about whether this child is his, that's the way to get it." "Why would I care?" Rachel asked. "Even if it is his, it's not my problem." "True," Henderson agreed, "but knowledge is power. If the child is his, there may be future situations where that information is relevant. Child support claims, custody issues, potential attempts by him to use the child as leverage to contact you. Better to have the facts established clearly now than to leave questions unanswered. Rachel considered this. Can I make him take the test? You can't personally, no, but you can inform him through legal channels that it's in everyone's best interest to establish paternity, and that if he refuses, it may affect any future claims he tries to make. Most people comply when they realize a lawyer is involved. Rachel left Henderson's office with a folder of information and a plan. The lawyer would send a formal letter to Michael stating the legal reality of the situation and requesting his cooperation with a paternity test. Rachel would document everything, keep records of all expenses and communications, and maintain her boundaries. If Michael tried to contact her directly, she would not respond. All communication would go through the attorney. As she drove home, Rachel felt something shift inside her. She was no longer the shocked, devastated woman who had discovered her boyfriend's betrayal less than 24 hours ago. She was becoming something else, something harder and more focused. She was protecting herself, creating distance, building walls. It felt necessary. It felt like survival. The apartment looked different when she entered it that evening. The management had changed the locks as promised, and the new key felt foreign in her hand. Michael's absence was everywhere and nowhere. His toothbrush was gone from the bathroom. His side of the closet was partially empty, but his presence still lingered in small ways. A book he had been reading sat on the coffee table. His coffee mug, the one that said "World's Okayest Boyfriend" that Rachel had bought him as a joke, still sat in the dish drainer. Shoes he had forgotten in his rush to pack remained by the door. Rachel spent the evening systematically removing every trace of him. The book went into a donation box. The mug went directly into the trash. A small act of catharsis that felt better than it should have. The shoes, the forgotten shirts in the laundry, the half-empty bottle of his cologne in the bathroom, all of it went into a cardboard box that she would ship to wherever he ended up. She took down the few photos of them that had been on shelves, tucked them into the back of a closet to deal with later, when seeing his face would not feel like a fresh wound. By the time she finished, it was nearly midnight, and the apartment felt like hers again. Not theirs, hers. The relief of that was profound. She was getting ready for bed when her phone rang. The number was unknown, but she answered anyway, thinking it might be related to work or the lawyer's office. "Rachel, please don't hang up." It was Michael's voice, calling from a number she had not blocked because she had not known it existed. "I got a new phone. I just need 5 minutes to talk to you." Rachel's first instinct was to end the call immediately, but curiosity kept her on the line. "You have 2 minutes. Talk. I'm staying at a friend's place," Michael said, the words tumbling out quickly as if he was afraid she would hang up before he finished. "I've been thinking about everything, about what I did, about what I threw away. Rachel, I made the biggest mistake of my life. I know you're angry, and you have every right to be, but I'm begging you to consider giving me another chance. We can go to counseling. I'll cut off all contact with Amanda. I'll do whatever it takes." "No," Rachel said simply. "Please just listen. I know I hurt you. I know I betrayed your trust. But people make mistakes. Relationships go through hard times. We can come back from this if we both want to." "I don't want to," Rachel said, her voice calm and final. "You didn't make a mistake, Michael. A mistake is forgetting to pay a bill or saying something thoughtless. What you did was make a series of deliberate choices over 4 months to betray me, while I supported you financially and emotionally. You used me. You lied to me. You risked my health. And even now, you're trying to minimize what you did by calling it a mistake, as if it was some momentary lapse in judgment, rather than a sustained campaign of deception." "That's not fair," Michael protested. "I'm trying to take responsibility. I'm trying to make things right." "You're trying to avoid the consequences of your actions," Rachel corrected. "You're trying to salvage the comfortable life you had, where someone else paid your bills, and asked nothing of you except basic fidelity, which apparently was too much to expect. I've already consulted a lawyer, Michael. I know my legal rights. You have no claim to my apartment, no right to contact me, and no basis for demanding anything from me. If the baby is yours, that's between you and Amanda. I want nothing to do with any of it." "You're being cruel," Michael said, his voice taking on a wounded quality. "I'm living on a friend's couch. I'm barely keeping it together. I lost my job because I've been too distracted to function. And you're just cutting me off completely, like I never meant anything to you." Rachel felt a surge of fury so intense it made her hands shake. "You lost your job because you made bad choices, not because of me. And yes, I am cutting you off, because that's what you do when someone proves they don't value you. You meant something to me, Michael. You meant 3 years of my life, thousands of dollars of my money, and countless hours of emotional energy I invested in someone who was lying to me the entire time. But that's over now. I'm done." "Rachel, please. I have a lawyer named Richard Henderson," Rachel interrupted. "All future communication should go through him. His office will be contacting you about a paternity test. You will cooperate with that test. Do not call me again. Do not come to my apartment. Do not contact me through friends or family. If you do, I will pursue a restraining order. Are we clear?" There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When Michael finally spoke, his voice was small and defeated. "Yeah, we're clear." Rachel ended the call and immediately blocked the new number. Then she sat on her couch in the quiet apartment and felt something surprising. Not sadness or regret, but relief. She had stood her ground. She had refused to be manipulated. She had protected herself. She thought about calling Diana to tell her about the conversation. But it was late, and honestly, there was nothing more to say. Michael was her past now. What mattered was figuring out her future. Rachel stood and walked to her bedroom window, looking out at the city lights spread below. Somewhere out there, Michael was on a friend's couch, dealing with the consequences of his choices. Somewhere out there, Amanda was pregnant and alone, probably realizing that the man she had thought cared about her was not who he had pretended to be. And here, in this apartment that was finally fully hers again, Rachel Morgan was beginning the long process of rebuilding her life. She did not know what that life would look like yet, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty. It would be on her terms, built by her own hands, protected by boundaries she would not compromise again. And it would be better than what she had lost, because what she had lost had never been real anyway. The following weeks passed in a blur of deliberate activity. Rachel threw herself into her work with renewed focus, finding comfort in the predictability of deadlines and deliverables. The Henderson account presentation went flawlessly, earning her team the contract and a congratulatory email from the company's vice president. She received a bonus of $8,000 and a promise of consideration for the next promotion cycle. Her colleagues noticed the change in her, the sharper edge to her already formidable work ethic, but no one asked questions. Rachel was grateful for their professional distance. At home, she began the process of reclaiming her space. She hired a professional cleaning service to deep clean the entire apartment, scrubbing away the last physical traces of Michael's presence. She bought new bedding, soft gray sheets that felt luxurious and entirely hers. She rearranged furniture, moving the couch to a different wall, shifting the dining table to catch better morning light. Small changes, but each one helped the apartment feel less like a place haunted by memories and more like a fresh start. Diana came over one Saturday morning 3 weeks after the breakup, carrying coffee and pastries from their favorite bakery. They sat on the balcony in the cool autumn air, watching leaves drift from the trees in the courtyard below. "You seem different," Diana observed, studying Rachel's face. "Calmer, maybe. More settled." Rachel considered this. "I think I'm just tired of being sad. Anger is more productive." Is it anger at him or anger at yourself? It was a perceptive question, typical of Diana. Rachel took a sip of her coffee before answering. "Both, if I'm honest. I'm angry at him for what he did, obviously. But I'm also angry at myself for ignoring signs I should have seen. You tried to warn me, and I dismissed it. I chose to believe his excuses, because believing them was easier than dealing with the reality. You loved him, Diana said gently. Love makes us want to believe the best in people, even when evidence suggests otherwise. That's not a character flaw, Rach. That's just being human. Maybe, Rachel said, but it cost me 3 years and more money than I want to think about. I won't make that mistake again. Diana was quiet for a moment, then said carefully, just make sure that protecting yourself doesn't turn into closing yourself off completely. Not everyone is Michael. Rachel nodded, but privately she was not sure she believed that anymore. Trust felt like a luxury she could no longer afford. 4 weeks after the confrontation, Rachel received a call from Henderson's office. The lawyer's paralegal informed her that Michael had agreed to the paternity test and that arrangements had been made for all parties to provide their samples. Amanda had been contacted through her own attorney, had confirmed she was willing to participate, and had revealed that she was approximately 14 weeks pregnant. The test would be conducted the following week, with results expected within 10 to 14 days after that. Rachel agreed to the appointment, though the whole situation felt surreal. She would be providing a DNA sample to prove that a child conceived during her boyfriend's affair was not hers, which of course it was not. But legal thoroughness required documentation of the obvious. She tried not to think too much about Amanda, about what the younger woman must be going through. That was not Rachel's responsibility. She had to keep reminding herself of that. The day of the test was overcast and cold, the kind of gray November morning that made everything feel muted and distant. Rachel drove to the medical facility where the testing would be conducted, a sterile building on the outskirts of the city that specialized in paternity and genetic testing. She had arranged her appointment to be at a different time than Michael's, having no desire to see him or speak to him. The process was quick and painless. A technician swabbed the inside of her cheek, labeled the sample carefully, and gave her paperwork to sign. Within 15 minutes, she was back in her car, driving away from the clinic and back toward her normal life. It felt anticlimactic, this clinical resolution to such an emotional catastrophe. 2 weeks later, on a Tuesday afternoon while Rachel was in a budget meeting, her phone buzzed with a call from Henderson's office. She excused herself and took the call in an empty conference room, her heart rate picking up despite her efforts to remain calm. The results are in, Henderson said without preamble. Michael is the biological father. No question. 99.97% certainty. Rachel felt a strange mixture of relief and sadness. Relief that the ambiguity was resolved, that there would be no future questions or complications involving her. Sadness for the child who would grow up with Michael as a father, for Amanda who was now tied to him for life through this pregnancy, for the mess that would unfold as they navigated co-parenting and child support, and all the complicated logistics of raising a child conceived in deception. Thank you for letting me know, Rachel said. What happens now? Now, nothing, as far as you're concerned, Henderson said. You have no legal connection to this situation. Michael will need to work out support arrangements with Amanda, but that's not your problem. I'll send you a final bill for my services, and unless something unexpected arises, you're free to move on with your life. Move on with your life. It sounded so simple when he said it like that. That evening, Rachel poured herself a glass of wine, something she had not done since the night she had cried herself to sleep after kicking Michael out. She sat on her balcony despite the cold, wrapped in a thick blanket, and allowed herself to feel the full weight of the past 6 weeks. The shock, the betrayal, the anger, the grief for what she had thought she had. And underneath all of that, relief. Profound, overwhelming relief that she had discovered the truth when she did. That she had not married Michael, had not had children with him, had not intertwined her life with his so completely that separating would have been a legal nightmare rather than a clean break. She thought about the baby, due sometime in late spring, a child who would never know how close they had come to having a stepmother who had been completely unaware of their existence. Rachel felt nothing toward this child, no connection or curiosity. They were simply a consequence of Michael's choices, a responsibility he would have to face without her. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Rachel's first instinct was to ignore it, but something made her open it. "This is Amanda. I got your number from Michael's phone before he changed it. I know you don't want to hear from me, and I understand why, but I needed to tell you, I'm sorry. I didn't know the truth about your relationship. He told me you were barely together anymore, that you were more roommates than partners. I should have questioned that more, should have insisted on meeting you or seeing proof. I was stupid and selfish. You didn't deserve what we did to you. I'm sorry." Rachel stared at the message for a long time. Part of her wanted to delete it without responding, to maintain her boundaries and refuse to engage. But another part, the part that was tired and sad and still trying to make sense of everything, wanted to respond. She typed and deleted 3 different replies before finally settling on one. "I appreciate you reaching out. I don't hold you responsible for Michael's lies. He deceived both of us, just in different ways. I hope you have support during your pregnancy and that things work out for you and your child. But I can't have any ongoing contact with you. I need to move forward, and that means leaving this entire situation behind. I wish you well." She sent the message, then immediately blocked the number. It was not cruel, she told herself. It was self-preservation. Amanda's apology did not change anything, did not heal the wound or restore what had been broken. It was just words, well-intentioned perhaps, but ultimately meaningless in the face of what had happened. 3 days later, Rachel was leaving her office building when she saw Michael. He was standing near the parking garage entrance, hands shoved in his jacket pockets, looking thinner and more worn than she remembered. When he saw her, he straightened up, and Rachel felt her entire body go tense. "I'm not here to cause trouble," Michael said quickly, raising his hands as if in surrender. "I just needed to see you, to talk to you in person." "We have nothing to talk about," Rachel said, continuing toward her car. "And you were told not to contact me." I know. Michael fell into step beside her, though he kept a careful distance. "But I've been living with the consequences of what I did, and I needed you to know that I understand now. I understand what I threw away, how good I had it with you, how much you did for me. I took you for granted, and I'm sorry. Truly, deeply sorry." Rachel stopped walking and turned to face him. In the fading afternoon light, she could see the toll the past weeks had taken on him. Dark circles under his eyes, stubble on his jaw, a defeated slump to his shoulders. She felt nothing. No sympathy, no satisfaction, nothing. He was just a man who had made terrible choices and was now living with them. "Are you looking for forgiveness?" Rachel asked. "Because I can't give you that. What you did wasn't just a mistake I can forgive and forget. It was a fundamental betrayal of everything I thought we had. You used me, Michael. For years, you used my kindness and generosity and support, and you repaid it by lying to me every single day. I don't forgive that. I don't even think about it anymore if I can help it. You're just someone I used to know who turned out to be someone I never really knew at all." "I lost my job," Michael said, and there was a desperate edge to his voice now. "I'm staying with friends, trying to find something new, but everywhere I apply wants references, wants to know about gaps in my employment. Amanda's lawyer is already talking about child support, about how much I'll owe once the baby comes. I can barely afford to eat, let alone support a child. I'm drowning, Rachel." "And what do you expect me to do about that?" Rachel asked, genuinely curious about what he thought this conversation would accomplish. "I don't know," Michael admitted. "I just thought maybe, for old time's sake, you could help me out. Just temporarily, until I get back on my feet. Alone, maybe. Something to help me get through this rough patch." Rachel almost laughed at the audacity. After everything, after the affair and the lies and the betrayal, He was asking her for money, as if she owed him anything, as if their 3 years together obligated her to bail him out of the consequences of his own actions. "No," Rachel said simply. "I'm not giving you money, Michael. I'm not helping you. You made your choices, and now you get to live with them. That's called being an adult." "That's cold," Michael said, and now there was anger mixing with the desperation. "I made a mistake. One mistake, and you're punishing me more than it deserves." "One mistake?" Rachel's voice rose slightly. "You had an affair for 4 months. 4 months of deliberate deception, of choosing to be with someone else while I paid your bills and believed in you. That's not one mistake. That's a pattern of choices, each one a betrayal. And now you're facing the natural consequences of those choices, consequences I have no responsibility to soften or fix." "I thought you loved me," Michael said, and he sounded genuinely confused, as if love meant unlimited forgiveness and support regardless of what he did. "I did love you," Rachel said, "but you killed that love when you betrayed me. Love isn't unconditional, Michael. It requires respect and honesty and basic human decency. You couldn't give me any of those things, so you don't get my love anymore. What you get is exactly what you earned, which is nothing." She turned and walked away from him, her heels clicking on the concrete with steady, purposeful strides. Michael called after her, his voice carrying across the parking garage, but she did not turn around, did not acknowledge him. She got into her car, locked the doors, and drove away without looking back. Her hands were shaking on the steering wheel, and she had to pull over 2 blocks away to catch her breath. The encounter had rattled her more than she wanted to admit, had brought back the anger and hurt she had been working so hard to process and move past. But underneath the turmoil, she felt something else too. Strength. She had faced him, had refused to be manipulated or guilted into helping him, had held her boundaries firm. That meant something. When she got home, she called Diana. "He showed up at my office," Rachel said without preamble. "Asked me for money." "Are you serious?" Diana's voice was sharp with outrage. "What did you tell him?" "I told him no. I told him he has to live with the consequences of his choices. And then I left." "Good," Diana said fiercely. "Good for you, Rach. That took strength." "It didn't feel like strength," Rachel admitted. "It felt like I was barely holding myself together." "That's what strength looks like sometimes," Diana said. "It's not about feeling powerful. It's about doing the right thing even when you're shaking inside. You did that today." After they hung up, Rachel made herself dinner, something simple and comforting. She ate at her dining table, looking around at her apartment, her space, her refuge. She had built this life through her own hard work. She had earned everything in it, and she was not going to let Michael or the ghost of what they had shared take that away from her. That night, Rachel slept better than she had in weeks. Not because the pain was gone, not because she had forgiven or forgotten, but because she had proven to herself that she could stand firm, that she could protect herself, that she was strong enough to survive this. Winter settled over the city with quiet determination, bringing shorter days and long, dark evenings that forced Rachel to spend more time with her own thoughts than she might have liked. The holidays came and went in a blur of office parties and family obligations. Rachel's parents, who lived 2 states away, had been shocked when she told them about the breakup over Thanksgiving dinner. Her mother immediately launching into a litany of "I never quite trusted him" statements that Rachel had not needed to hear. Her father, more pragmatic, had simply hugged her and told her she deserved better. He had appreciated his brevity. Diana dragged her to a New Year's Eve party, insisting that staying home alone would be giving Michael too much power over her life. Rachel had gone reluctantly, nursed a single glass of champagne through the evening, and left at 12:15, having fulfilled her obligation to celebrate without actually feeling celebratory. The new year stretched ahead of her, full of possibility but also uncertainty. Who was she without the relationship that had defined so much of her adult life? What did she want now that she was no longer planning a future with someone else? January brought brutally cold weather and a new project at work, a major rebranding campaign for a tech startup that needed to establish credibility in a competitive market. Rachel led the team with her characteristic precision, but she found herself approaching the work differently now. She delegated more, trusting her junior team members with responsibilities she might have hoarded before. She left the office at reasonable hours most days, no longer feeling the need to prove her worth through endless overtime. Something fundamental had shifted in how she saw herself and her value. Her worth was not measured by how much she sacrificed or how much she gave. It was inherent, independent of anyone else's recognition or appreciation. On a gray Tuesday afternoon in late January, Rachel was at the grocery store, methodically working through her list, when she heard a familiar voice in the next aisle over. She froze, recognizing Patricia Stevens' tone even before she saw her. Michael's mother. Rachel's first instinct was to abandon her cart and leave through the nearest exit, but something made her stay. She was not running anymore. Not from memories, not from uncomfortable encounters, not from anything. She turned the corner with her cart, just as Patricia reached for a bag of coffee, and their eyes met. Michael's mother looked older than Rachel remembered, more tired, the lines around her eyes deeper. For a moment, neither woman spoke, the air between them thick with everything unsaid. "Rachel," Patricia said finally, her voice soft and uncertain. "I've thought about calling you so many times." "Hello, Patricia," Rachel replied, keeping her tone neutral but not unkind. "You look well," Patricia continued, and there was genuine warmth in her observation. "You look like you're doing well, I mean." "I am," Rachel said simply. "I hope you are, too." Patricia's smile was sad and weary. "I've had better months, if I'm honest. Michael is struggling. The baby was born 3 weeks ago, a little girl. Michael is living in my basement now, trying to find work, trying to figure out fatherhood. Amanda's parents are helping her, but there's a lot of tension about child support and custody arrangements. It's all very complicated and painful." Rachel felt a pang of something that might have been sympathy, though not for Michael, for the child, innocent in all of this. For Amanda, navigating new motherhood while dealing with a man who had proven himself unreliable. Even, surprisingly, for Patricia, who had raised a son who had turned out capable of such careless cruelty. "I'm sorry it's been difficult," Rachel said, and she meant it. She had no desire for anyone to suffer, even if that suffering was the natural consequence of choices made. Patricia looked at her for a long moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. "I need to tell you something. I need to apologize. When Michael first told me what happened, I made excuses for him. I told myself that relationships are complicated, that young people make mistakes, that you should have been more forgiving. I even called you, if you remember, trying to convince you to give him another chance." Rachel nodded. She remembered. It had been one of the harder moments of those early weeks, resisting the pressure from Michael's family to reconsider her decision. "I was wrong," Patricia continued, and tears were gathering in her eyes now. "I've watched him these past months, watched him blame everyone but himself for the situation he's in. I've watched him fail to show up for his daughter, make excuses about why he can't contribute financially, complain about how unfair his life has become, and I realized that you did the right thing. You saw who my son really was, and you protected yourself. You didn't let him drag you down with him. I should have supported that instead of trying to guilt you into staying." Rachel felt her own eyes burning but refused to let tears fall in the middle of a grocery store. "Thank you for telling me that. It means more than you probably know. You were always too good for him," Patricia said, and there was a finality to it, an admission that cost her something to make. "I see that now. I hope you find someone who deserves you, who values what you bring to a relationship. I hope you find happiness." "I'm finding it," Rachel said quietly. On my own terms. In my own time. Patricia reached out and briefly touched Rachel's hand where it rested on the shopping cart handle. "I'm glad," she said. "Truly glad." Then she turned and walked away, her own cart half full, leaving Rachel standing alone in the aisle with her thoughts. The encounter stayed with Rachel for days, resonating in ways she had not expected. Patricia's apology had not changed the past, had not made the betrayal hurt less or the wasted time matter less, but it had given Rachel something she had not known she needed: validation, confirmation that she had not been crazy or cruel or unreasonable, that her response had been appropriate, measured, the right choice for her well-being and future. February brought the first hints that winter might eventually end. Days grew incrementally longer. The brutal cold softened into merely unpleasant chill. Rachel's team won the tech startup account, a major victory that came with promotions for 2 of her junior colleagues and another bonus for Rachel herself. She celebrated with her team at a nice restaurant, enjoying their enthusiasm and youth without feeling the need to be the center of attention. She was learning to take pride in building others up, in creating success that extended beyond her own achievements. On a Saturday morning in early March, Rachel woke to sunlight streaming through her bedroom window, the first truly warm morning of the year. She lay in bed for a few minutes, listening to birds singing outside, feeling a lightness in her chest that had been absent for so long. She could not remember the last time she had woken up without immediately feeling the weight of grief or anger or regret. Today, she just felt peaceful. She got up and made coffee, then carried her mug onto the balcony. The courtyard below was beginning to show signs of spring, small green shoots pushing through the earth where nothing had grown for months. She thought about Michael, wondered briefly how he was managing fatherhood and unemployment and the consequences of his choices. But the thought was fleeting, clinical, no longer attached to any deep emotion. He was just someone she used to know, part of a chapter of her life that had closed. Her phone buzzed with a text from Diana. "Farmer's market this morning? Beautiful day for it." Rachel smiled and typed back, "Be ready in 30. She dressed in jeans and a light sweater, pulled her hair into a ponytail, and felt younger than she had in years, not because she was trying to recapture something lost, but because she was finally free of the weight she had been carrying, the weight of trying to fix someone who did not want to be fixed, of investing in someone who saw her as a resource rather than a partner, of believing that love meant sacrifice rather than mutual support. The farmer's market was crowded with people celebrating the arrival of spring, families with children, couples walking hand in hand, elderly folks examining produce with the seriousness of professional critics. Rachel and Diana wandered through the stalls, buying fresh bread and local honey and flowers that smelled like hope. "You seem different today," Diana observed as they stopped at a booth selling handmade jewelry. "Lighter, somehow." "I feel lighter," Rachel admitted. "I think I finally let it all go. The anger, the resentment, the feeling that I wasted 3 years. It wasn't waste. It was learning. I learned what I will and won't accept. I learned the difference between love and enabling. I learned that my worth isn't measured by how much I give to someone who doesn't appreciate it." Diana linked her arm through Rachel's and squeezed gently. "I'm proud of you. I know I've said it before, but I need you to really hear it. You handled this with so much grace and strength. You didn't let it break you." "I almost did," Rachel said honestly. "There were nights I wanted to call him, to say we could work it out, just to stop feeling so alone. But I didn't, and I'm glad I didn't." Later, they continued walking, and as they did, a man around Rachel's age, maybe a year or 2 older, accidentally bumped into her as he was turning away from a vegetable stand, his arms full of bags. "I'm so sorry," he said immediately, steadying himself. "I wasn't watching where I was going." "It's fine," Rachel assured him, smiling. "No harm done." He smiled back, a warm, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "I'm Marcus. and I'm apparently terrible at navigating crowded markets." "Rachel," she replied, "and I've seen worse navigation skills. Trust me." They chatted for a few minutes. Easy conversation about the market, the weather, the city. Diana had diplomatically moved a few steps away, pretending to be very interested in a display of artisanal soaps. When Marcus asked if Rachel would like to get coffee sometime, she found herself saying yes without hesitation or fear. It did not mean anything profound. It was just coffee, just possibility. But it felt good to be open to it, to not automatically close herself off because of what had happened before. Marcus exchanged numbers with her, promised to text later that week, and walked away with his bags of vegetables and a slightly dopey smile that made Diana laugh once he was out of earshot. "Well," Diana said, "that was unexpected." "It was just coffee," Rachel said, but she was smiling too. "It's always just coffee," Diana teased, "until it's not." They spent the rest of the morning at the market, then got lunch at a small cafe with outdoor seating where they could enjoy the unseasonably warm weather. Rachel ordered a salad and actually ate it, finding her appetite had returned fully for the first time in months. They talked about work, about Diana's own complicated dating life, about their plans for the summer that suddenly seemed full of possibility rather than empty space to fill. As they were leaving, Rachel glanced at her reflection in the cafe window and saw someone she recognized but had not seen clearly in a long time. She saw a woman who was strong, successful, whole. She saw someone who had survived betrayal and come out on the other side with her dignity intact and her self-worth restored. She saw someone who was ready, finally, to build a future that belonged entirely to her. 2 weeks later, Rachel went on that coffee date with Marcus. It went well enough that they scheduled a second date, then a third. He was a high school history teacher, funny and kind, with none of the red flags that Rachel now knew to watch for. He paid his own bills, talked about his work with passion, asked questions about her life and listened to the answers. It was refreshing and easy, and completely different from what she had experienced with Michael. But Rachel took it slowly, deliberately. She was not rushing into anything, not making assumptions about futures, or investing herself completely until she was certain it was earned. She had learned that lesson well. Marcus seemed to understand and respect her pace, never pushing for more than she was ready to give. Spring fully arrived, transforming the city with blossoms and green leaves and longer, lighter days. Rachel's promotion came through officially in April. A title change to Director of Marketing Strategy, and a salary increase that put her well into 6 figures. She celebrated by taking herself on a solo trip to the coast, spending a long weekend in a small town where she could walk on the beach and eat fresh seafood, and think about absolutely nothing but the sound of waves and the feel of sand under her feet. On her last evening there, she sat on the balcony of her rented cottage, watching the sun set over the ocean in streaks of orange and pink and gold. She thought about where she had been 6 months ago, shattered and angry, and wondering if she would ever feel whole again. She thought about the version of herself who had tolerated being undervalued and used because she had confused love with sacrifice. That woman felt like a stranger now, someone she had known once, but had grown beyond. Rachel pulled out her phone and opened her photo album, scrolling back to pictures from her relationship with Michael. She looked at them with clinical interest, the way you might look at photos from a historical period you had studied, but not experienced. There she was, smiling next to Michael at a restaurant, at a park, in her apartment. She looked happy in the photos, but Rachel could see now what she had not seen then. She could see the tiredness around her eyes, the subtle tension in her shoulders, the smile that did not quite reach her eyes in the later photos. She had been slowly diminishing herself to accommodate his needs, his excuses, his failures. She had been so focused on being a good partner that she had forgotten to require him to be one too. She deleted the photos, every single one, watching them disappear with a sense of finality that felt right. Then she opened her camera and took a selfie. The sun set behind her, her hair blown by the ocean breeze, her smile genuine and free. This was who she was now. This was the woman she had fought to become. When Rachel returned home, she found a letter in her mailbox, forwarded from Henderson's office. Inside was a single page, handwritten in Michael's messy scrawl. She almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity won out. The letter was not an apology. Not exactly. It was more of a rambling acknowledgement of his situation, of how hard things were with the baby, with Amanda, with his mother's disappointment in him. He mentioned, almost as an afterthought, that he had finally found a job, something entry-level at an accounting firm, barely enough to cover his child support obligations. He said he understood now what he had lost, what Rachel had meant to him, but that he did not expect her to care or respond. He just wanted her to know that she had been right about everything, and he was sorry it had taken him so long to see it. Rachel read the letter once, then folded it carefully and placed it in the back of a drawer where she kept other documents from that period of her life. The paternity test results, the final bill from Henderson's office, a few cards and mementos she had not yet decided whether to keep or discard. The letter would go there too, part of the archive of a difficult time that she had survived. She did not respond to the letter. Michael did not need or deserve her response. He needed to live with his choices, to grow up finally, to become the man he should have been all along. That was not her responsibility or her concern. Summer arrived in full force, bringing heat and humidity and long evenings when Rachel would sit on her balcony with a book or a glass of wine, feeling perfectly content in her own company. Marcus was still in the picture, their relationship progressing slowly but steadily toward something that felt solid and real. He had met Diana, who approved. Rachel had met his friends, his sister, even his elderly mother, who hugged Rachel tightly and told her she had good energy. Sitin, they had not said they loved each other yet, were not making grand plans for the future, but there was potential there, possibility built on honesty and mutual respect. But even more important than Marcus was what Rachel had built on her own. She had renovated her apartment, painting the walls a soft blue that made her feel calm, buying art that spoke to her, creating a space that reflected who she was rather than who she had been trying to be. She had reconnected with old friends she had neglected during her relationship with Michael, had started a book club with colleagues, had taken up running again in the early mornings when the air was cool and the city was just waking up. On a Saturday in late July, Rachel was getting ready for a work event, a cocktail party to celebrate the firm's 20th anniversary. She put on a white dress she had bought specifically for the occasion, simple but elegant, and looked at herself in the mirror. She saw a woman who had rebuilt herself from the ground up, who had learned that strength was not about never falling, but about getting back up with dignity and determination. She saw someone who knew her worth and would not settle for less than she deserved ever again. Her phone chimed with a text from Marcus. "You're going to be the most beautiful woman there tonight. Can't wait to see you." Rachel smiled and typed back, "See you soon." As she grabbed her keys and purse, she took one last look around her apartment. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the space she had made entirely her own. She thought about Michael briefly, wondered if he was happy, hoped for his daughter's sake that he was learning to be a better man. But the thought carried no weight, no lingering pain. He was just part of her story, not the defining chapter, not the ending. Rachel closed and locked her apartment door behind her, the new key turning smoothly in the new lock. She walked down the stairs with confident steps, got into her car, and drove toward the future she was building one deliberate choice at a time. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, and Rachel felt something she had not felt in a very long time. She felt free. She felt whole. She felt exactly like herself, neither diminished by what she had lost, nor defined by who she had loved. She was simply Rachel Morgan, 38 years old, successful and strong, and finally, completely at peace with the woman she had become. And as she drove through the city toward whatever came next, she understood with absolute clarity that the best revenge was not making Michael suffer. It was not even making him regret what he had thrown away. The best revenge was living well, building a life so full and rich and satisfying that he became nothing more than a footnote, a cautionary tale, a lesson learned on the way to becoming someone who understood her own value. She had lost 3 years. Yes, she had lost money and time and the future she had imagined, but she had gained something infinitely more valuable. She had gained herself back. And that, Rachel knew with bone-deep certainty, was worth more than any relationship built on lies ever could have been. The city stretched out before her, full of possibility and promise, and Rachel Morgan drove toward it with a smile on her face and peace in her heart, ready for whatever came next. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And drop a comment below. What city are you watching from? And if your heart tells you to, feel free to leave me a tip on Buy Me a Coffee. Just check the first pinned comment. Thanks for keeping me company and for the coffee, and I'll see you in the next story.